Okay. Redox.
This is the dragon ruler that I believe should stay banned the most,
Yeah.
and it's mostly just because a monster reborn effect is extremely strong, and then you just add on top of it that it can also bring itself back from the grave. Granted, not in the same turn, but I think all of the other ones are fine. This one is like a little bit suspect.
His
for me.
typing too, though. Just think about the things he synergizes with. I know they're not all legal right now, but glow up bulb, right? Like the combo of sending him and bulb, or
Yep.
the combo of the Earth has a lot of one-offs that are really
I'd love
solid.
to discard Dandelion to revive
Yeah,
another
like
monster and then get 2
imagine
tokens.
the amount of pluses that would come with that. And I'm trying to think right now of Earth off the top of my head that are like insane. I really don't. Nothing's coming to me inherently.
I mean, yeah, this is a card that like would have been really ridiculous like a few years ago during like Goki format or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh god.
Earth is an attribute that every once in a while just becomes really good. It's not like Wind, where Wind is just always terrible.
Yeah.
It Earth cycles back in, and just having not only a monster reborn, but also just a recursive thing that sort of mimics Destrudo in having a lot of defense. So worst case scenario, you can just put up this wall that's super difficult to kill.
Yeah. Agreed.
This is the only dragon ruler. I think I'm gonna say no. Mostly for its implications in the future, because right now, in the current metagame, I don't think it breaks anything. But I'm not like entirely caught up on all the new stuff that's coming out like in the immediate future, or some of the other stuff that like I don't know what type Drytron is.
True, they're fairy. If you're uncertain about any of the new support, you could check out youtube.com/LoveshackYT for all your up-to-date information on the newest Yu-Gi-Oh products and releases.
That sounds like a really good idea.
Just gonna work in that little plug there. That's okay. I took a 6-month hiatus from the game, so I'm still working my way back through Lightning Overdrive and stuff. So don't worry. I'm not fully there yet either. Yeah, I'm a no on Redox as well. I would be very happy if he came back, because being able to play all 4 and just the idea of somehow building like a Red Eyes deck with the Dragon Rulers would seem super fun to me. But
I'm like a proponent of bringing all the Dragon Rulers to one, but this is probably the one I would see most easily getting rebanned, like easily.
Yeah, and he can also search an Earth Dragon, so I'm fairly certain he could search like Komori Dragon or Blackland Fire Dragon, which, I mean, yes, they're vanillas, but, 1500 attack, you never know.
That's pretty broken.
That's a fair point. All right, so we're both 0 on Redox, but we'd welcome it if it came back. Samsara Lotus, another FTK card with Arcana Force the World. Rule of thumb, I just don't want to get into FTK cards. It's just kind of a waste of everyone's time. Master Plan, I hate Spiral. I loathe Spiral more than I could even put into words. It's the least fun deck to play against. I don't care if you have to be like Giga Brain to be really good with it. Like, it's still just, I'm sitting there with my dick in my hand for 45 minutes, looking like a fool, watching my opponent just play through endless amounts of combos unless I have the perfect hand traps. I'm good, man. I am all good.
This card just also in general, just if you read it as a card completely removed from Spiral, does too much stuff. This card searches 3 cards, at least, if it hits the field.
1 Spiral Resort and 1 Spiral Monster. And that effect is a once per turn, but the other one is not. It's a level 7 spellcaster.
During their plays, this card would search you 1 Spiral Resort, 1 Spiral Monster, and anywhere from 2 to 4 Spiral missions, depending on how your hand played out. This card is extremely unbalanced.
Agreed.
And the fact that it took so long for this card in the deck to get hit blew my mind.
Yep, Magician's Souls, I feel like, was the strong.
Let's hit Quick Fix. And then, but Master Plan is searching like 5+ cards every turn. So this is a card that I want to stay at 0, both for real reasons and for PTSD reasons.
Yeah, no, it's not fun. It's just not, it's not Spiral a healthy. Yeah, it did, and it was a tier 0 deck for a little while. But again, Magician Souls existing now makes this even more powerful. So no, we're good. We're good on that. Substitute. Can I just say one of my favorite arts, dude? I adore the art on this card. I just think it's so cool. Yeah, this card's stupid.
This card is another. It's an FTK card. It stays a no unless it has a hard once per turn. If you don't know what the loop is, there's another frog card that's called Ronin Totem, which just says you can banish a frog monster from your grave. special it from the graveyard, but it doesn't get banished or anything. It's an old form card where they didn't put like
any
contingencies on it, so you can just loop every single frog from your deck using this card. And then there's a card called Mass Driver that would blow up your opponent, which is banned. But again, this is sort of like this is just like a problematic card that I wouldn't want to see come back. I wouldn't like inherently be super surprised if it came back to 1 and did nothing, but I don't want it to come back to 1.
I don't know about that. The fact that it's a level 1 and the fact that Swap Frog can mill it and it can be revived by stuff, I wouldn't chance it. Now, let me just say 2 real quick things. The reason I even like opened a discussion on this card rather than just skipping it entirely is because if it was not an FTK only card, if it was not like if it had a once per turn, it would actually be a solid card for frogs, right? It like in the same vein as like Lone Fire Blossom, where you thin the deck, you get a swap out, you trigger swap's effect. Like, it would actually be something that would, like, start your combos off. But the fact that this doesn't have any restrictions... Yeah.
It also just has, like, this really cute thing at the end where it can't be destroyed by battle, which is, like,
well, he can.
Little frustrating.
He can be destroyed by battle. He's not a frog. He's a toad.
Oh.
So, frog monsters except Frog the Jam. Oh, of course, you know.
My bad.
Poor guy.
He can protect Dupe Frog.
Yes, he can. And Dupe Frog is the only one that can be attacked, so if you have him out in Dupe. But if he was a one-of and you didn't have some kind of endless loop where you could just go through your whole deck. And again, the last thing on this is you could also summon tokens, and you use the tokens to tribute. So if there's a card that puts tokens out, like Steam the Cloak or something, I don't fucking know, you can do that. So yeah, no, he's got to stay banned unless he were to get an errata. I adore this card, just on a personal note, so like I would very much welcome an errata on this. All you have to do is make it a once per turn. That's it. That's literally all you have to do. Honestly, you could make it a soft once per turn and it wouldn't be too bad because it's not self-revivable by Ronin Totem. So it's not like you can keep bouncing it back. I don't like erratas on principle because I think it neuters down a card. Like, you look at Chaos Emperor nowadays, and it's just kind of like a joke. Like, it used to be the most quote-unquote feared card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it was, you know, but now it's just kind of terrible. And so,
they should just retrain cards instead of errataing them. I agree.
But in this case, I like his art. I think he'd be really cool to come back if he had a once per turn, or a hard once per turn, or a Disc Commander effect. Any of those 3. Alright, Tyrant Neptune, FTK card. Basically, you just make degenerate combos, you put it out. I'm not even... Look up Tyrant Neptune FTK, it's a thing. It's not worth wasting your time with. And we're running very long on this segment already, but we are going to finish out the list here regardless with a couple of cards that we have left. Title, the Dragon Ruler of Waterfalls. I'm a yes. I think Mermail will get a boost from it. I think a few other water decks could definitely get a bit of help. As
I've said before, I'm a proponent for all the Dragon Rulers coming to 1. This one has had its discard effect age the best, in my opinion. Foolish Burying a card is absurd.
Yeah. And Foolish Burying any monster. I always forget that effect, too, because it's like...
You think that it should just be a water monster.
Yeah, you would think. Not. But you discard this and Dragoons, and then you mill, I don't know, Fishborg Blaster, and then boom, you're set. Yeah, no, I'm cool with this going to 1, though. I really like the Dragon Rulers. I very fondly remember them after the fact. I hated Dragon Rulers when it was a legal deck, but I also, like, didn't play anything meta, and I just used to get bodied by the deck because it was so unbelievably powerful in what it could do. But nowadays, it's not going to be too big of a deal. 3 left. Victory Dragon. I mean... This card shouldn't... It's stupid.
It's missing a line of text that says it can't be played in a real duel, and that's the only reason that it's on the list.
Yeah, so and to be honest, like, I don't even get these match winner cards. Like, if these match winner cards... No, like, you could debate this, and maybe that's a topic for another video that we could go back and forth on. These match winner cards are just dumb. Like, they're cool, and I get why they exist, although they use some of the nicest art in Yu-Gi-Oh! On these cards, and then we just never actually get to, like, use them or anything, or even collect them.
Yeah, because they're supposed to be, like, promotional cards for stuff. Like, they're not supposed to be, like, things that you can play.
Yeah.
Which is
the whole point. But his effect is bad. In the TCG, you can just scoop, so it doesn't even matter. In Japan, you have to wait 5 turns, so there's more effective ways to do it, and obviously putting out 3 dragons is not that hard, but, yeah, no, I mean, I'm going way too much detail into a card that doesn't need it.
Missing a line of text. That's
right. Okay, 2 more cards, both of which I... Alright, guys, this is the reason this is what inspired me to make this series when this conversation first came up. I want Yata back. I want Yata to come to 1. I understand what it did back in the day in 2004, 17 years ago, But I think that it is different now. I think that while the card itself is still very powerful, the fact that it can't be special summoned, and decks are pretty reliant on normal summons in general, and Chaos Emperor doesn't exist anymore, and I mean, basically, they cut his balls off. I really want to see this card come back. I want to see what it would do. I'm very curious to see what the market would look like if this card ever came back on a totally separate note. But I think people live in fear of how broken Yata was back then. I do not think he would be an instant game changer or game breaker now. The only thing I see happening is people will try to find ways to force him into decks that he doesn't really fit in on the off chance they can lock the opponent out of a draw. But I think it could come to one and be okay.
So, I'd like to see this card tested at one, because this is a card that could very easily become extremely broken. We've personally discussed certain cards that would make this better, most of which are banned or limited or hard to play in some respect. But basically, any deck that could consistently come up with a way to give itself an additional normal summon would probably be able to break this card.
Well, there is that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but there is that spirit monster, Nikitama, that's basically when it's normal summon, you get the effect of normal summoning an additional spirit monster during that turn. I don't know if that's the type of card you'd be thinking of.
Spirits are super relevant.
No, but
I mean something along the lines of the Brilliant Fusion combo or Nightmare Goblet. Two things that I think were super unhealthy for the game and should never happen, but it's Konami. So those things might happen again, and this is a card that is like ripe for abusing something like that, where if you just get like a little creative, you could probably come up with a way to Yata lock your opponent again. If you can find a way to consistently get a second normal summon, or if you can find a deck that consistently doesn't need its normal summon.
Grinder Gold.
And I'm sure that if this card came to one, people would find a way. But I'm not entirely opposed to them testing it at one, because you're right. Like, it requires a normal summon. It's a level 2, which is a horrible level. It has a very awkward Wind Fiend Spirit.
Yep.
Sort of stat distribution. I'd have to look at one card that I'm thinking of that might be able to get it to your hand. What are the rescue animal stats? Is it 300, 100 for the rescue animal?
Emerging, emergency, rescue would not be able to search it if that's the card you're thinking of, because it does have to be a beast type, and it does have to be exactly 300 attack and 100 defense.
Well, there's probably some dumb card that someone would come up with to find a way to get this into your hand, but someone would come up with like a ridiculous way to loop that Lightsworn Link 3 that can add any card from your graveyard hand. Yeah, like that would be like a deck, and it would be like one of those super convoluted like FTK combo decks that like don't really work. But I could see it at one. It would be interesting to see what happens. I could see it very easily becoming broken because its actual effect is absurd.
Yeah, it's a really good effect, and I almost wish it had to attack directly in order to be able to do it. Now, granted, 99.9% of the time it's going to attack directly unless your opponent summons a glow-up bulb.
Beating over.
You could buff it up with something, though. You could use, like, I don't fucking know, a monster that, like, Mage Power.
Yata Garasu, Axe of Despair.
I mean, that feels like a broken combo in, like, one of the old video games. But, honestly, I always thought Yata was super cool, and he, like, I don't know. I don't think it's a bad... I mean, listen, this game is going to continue to have power creep and broken cards, right? So every once in a while, it's nice to take a banned card that might be a little broken and put those new broken cards in their place. If we're going to have broken cards already, let's see how broken you really are if Yata comes back and how good you can be against, you know, against the old guard, if you will. So I'm a fan. I'd welcome it back to one with the very much acknowledgement that it could be a bad decision, but you're never going to know if you don't try.
Yeah.
It's like Coke. All right. Lastly, I saved this one for last because this is obviously like the card. The card. You can't talk about Maxx C without triggering people, so you're either going to hate or love the next 4 minutes. But I think this card should be at 3. It's a 3 or 0 card, first of all. It can't be at 1. Someone at this... I was at a local shop the other day. I was at Toy Ball, I think in Dartmouth, and some guy that I didn't really ask to talk to me was talking to me. Sorry if you're watching this, but I don't think you would be. And he just kept going on and on. Oh, Maxx C. He's like, I could see that coming to limited. I'm like, no, you can't limit this card because it's either 3 or 0. The card being at 1 means somebody draws it first, gets an unfair advantage because basically you just put too much pressure on the opponent, and there's not... It's just not... It doesn't work for me. But
So I've played in all of the formats. I've played when this card was at 3, 2, and 1, and 0.
Yeah.
When this card was at 1, it was probably the most sacky, unbelievably ridiculous card. Like, your opponent would, like, drop a Maxx C on you, and you'd be like, cool, you had 4 cards in your deck, and the one you drew was Maxx C. Awesome. So, like, just on the principle of, like, people getting actually mad about having this card dropped on them, I don't want it at 1.
No.
I don't want it at 0 because the game is just, like, it's way too unchecked. We have, like, 7 hand traps, and decks are still comboing for 8 years.
Yep.
This card either stops them from doing that, or makes them take the Maxx C challenge. Which like, I want this card at 3 because I feel like its existence checks other things. And the way that decks are currently made, they benefit players from knowing combos, not knowing how to play the game. This card forces you to learn how to play the game. So if your opponent drops Maxx C on you, you have to use critical thinking to think, how many cards do I want to give them to get to a board that I think will be able to live through them getting that many cards? And I think that sort of level of thought is important for the game. And I get that a lot of people don't want to think that much. And that's probably one of the big reasons that they don't want this card back. The other thing about this card is I think the further into this game we get, the more likely it is you are to lose the Maxx C challenge. Yeah. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of decks that maybe aren't summoning 35 times to deck you out. But the thing that they are doing is most decks now require some kind of weird bricky one-of that you're running in the deck that you don't want in your deck anymore. Or that you want to stay in your deck, I'm sorry. Where your combo like needs to pull it out of the deck at a specific time. And so if you like Maxx C and your opponent summons 20 times and you pull your 3 bricks that you need to get out of the deck from a combo piece out of your deck, like, you lost because you played Maxx C.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that that's like a fantastic rationale for why a card that lets you draw a ton of cards should come to 3. I just feel like the deck, the game itself is just way too unchecked without this card.
Agreed. 100%.
I say that again as having, if they wanted to put it to 2, I don't think that would be horrible. When it was at 2, it was like a little sacky, but you didn't feel like your opponent just drew something that they shouldn't have drawn.
Right.
Like 2
unless you're Ben. Ben hated this card. He used to get angry at the mere sight of it. Just want to put that out there.
I also used to get really mad, but then the card went away, and I was. Now we have things like imagine like Dragons? Your opponent was playing oh god, Goki, and you just drop your Maxx C on them. Like, that person would have to grow a brain and learn how to do something other than their gun block.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Or they're gonna flip a table and get mad, and it's just either way is great. And I want to wrap this up a little bit because we are 45 minutes and this is gonna be a longer one. But like, there's just a lot to talk about. Like, this stuff is just like, you could talk about this shit for hours. Honestly, we've obviously some people are gonna disagree, some people aren't. But the thing with Maxx C is powerful doesn't mean can't exist. And Maxx C is a checks and balance card that basically forces you to do what Gores would back in the day. Do you push for game? Can you do it? Can you figure it out? Or do you play conservatively? Do you maybe just play 1 or 2 monsters, give your opponent a draw, but you put a powerful Floodgate or a powerful Omni Negate out that gives you a chance to play? You have to think about what you're doing, and that is not something we see enough in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially when you have decks like Dragon Link that can get Nibiru'd and then just still make a board of 6 fucking extra deck monsters or whatever. That shouldn't be the case.
I especially think, like, so we've been getting more hand traps. And so one of the problems with Maxx C that people bring up is like, well, you'll just draw all your hand traps and then you'll end their turn. Well, honestly, if you're dropping Maxx C, their turn should be ending anyway, for one. But also, those hand traps, a few of them can affect Maxx C. So maybe, like, that would probably you would probably start playing 3 Maxx C, 3 Ash, and 3 Gamma like mandatorily in every deck, which I'm not like a super huge fan of mandatory cards.
Right.
But
they already are, though. So in some fashion of those hand traps from the pool are mandatory.
You're always playing some combination of X hand trap that's good for the format. This card would just stop decks that, like, it wouldn't even stop decks. It would stop bad players from winning because they have better cards.
Yeah, in other words, players that have a bunch of money and
There's some situations where like you get Maxx C and you lose because you got Maxx C.
Yeah.
But there's also instances where you get Ash and you lose because you got Ash. Or you get Drolled and you lose because you got Drolled, or Gamut, or whatever.
There's some situations where you don't open a hand trap and your opponent makes 5 monsters, all that negate effects, and you lose because you didn't even get a chance to play.
I think that as Yu-Gi-Oh players, because of the way the game itself is designed, we're conditioned to be like afraid of cards that allow people to draw cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't inherently think that's a terrible thing. The 40 card deck minimum is partially to blame for why draw cards are so powerful in this game. But yeah, I think Maxx C should be at 3, or at the very least tested at 3, because I could very easily, like, I'm not dumb. I can look at this card and understand that it's insane, and I can understand that maybe if it was at 3, it would just become degenerate again. You have to ban it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the formats for Yu-Gi-Oh have been shaping out over the last few years since this card and Vanity's Emptiness got banned have been really exhausting and time-consuming. And those are two things that I don't want to say about hobbies that I'm supposed to enjoy.
Right. I feel like the way the game goes and the amount of time that turns take because people are just throwing everything on the board. Now, like, there's a reason time limits exist. I get that. And so, but, like, there should be more interaction, and some decks nowadays become solitaire, where it's just like, I'm going to put my whole dick on the board, and you're going to find a way to move it, or you're going to lose. And that's it. It's just, I'm putting it out there, and you're either going to break it or lose. But with Maxx C, you say, all right, well, you've summoned this, you're now playing your World Legacy Guard Dragon. Well, I'm going to drop Maxx C, so I'm going to get 1. Now, it's your choice whether or not, how far do you want to go before I get a chance to play? And then it's Maxx C can be countered by Called by the Grave, which obviously is at 1. But my point is that Ash too, right?
Say a caveat. If this card came to 3, I think Called by the Grave should also go back.
Agreed. Yes, agreed. And we can talk about that more down the line with the limited stuff, because I almost think Called by the Grave should be at 3 or 0 always, but that's another conversation. This can be Ash Blossomed as well. So it does have its own checks and balances that didn't exist back then. So, to wrap up, I think Maxx C should come to 3. It's been in the OCG, it's been legal there for a while. I know our formats are different, but everyone likes to push the theory that OCG formats are what shape what they end up being here for the most part. Let's just get... I think this card does a lot more good for the overall state of the game than it does damage to the meta. That's my opinion, and that's my closing take on this.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's sort of an opinion that can only be formed once you've played in a format with it. A lot of the people who we talk to consistently, or not a lot, but like more than maybe about half are like newer players who didn't play during Maxx C format and don't really understand how that card feels to interact with. And I feel like that's sort of a problem that a lot of people who are newer to the game are going to have. This is a card that you have to experience to have a fully formed opinion on. But anyway,
Gores, too. People that didn't play back when Gores was a broken card that people were calling to be banned will look at Gores nowadays and be like, this card's trash. But Gores was the original Maxx C. It was like, oh, do I attack? Am I going to run into a Gores and lose because the opponent's going to get that kind of damage? And I think so many Yu-Gi-Oh players are so conditioned to hold on to memories of what cards did or the horror stories of what cards were, and they're not willing to, like, be like, all right, let's see how it would be, or let's see where it would go. And people just are going to... There's going to be people that watch this video and are going to be like, you're really stupid, LOL, Maxx C can't come back, and not post any context. And, like, I invite you, if you disagree, please post. I'm going to share this video in a bunch of different places, hopefully. If you guys watch it and you disagree, let me know why. Like, let us know what points you think, you know, why this card couldn't come back. Because there are valid arguments about it, but just kind of slapping on your helmet and being like, nah, this can't come back because I said so, LOL. This card does more good than bad for the game, and I think for the long-term health of the game, it would be more beneficial to have Maxx C than not.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, we went very long, so thank you to anyone that did stick through for the whole thing, or maybe watched it in 2 parts, I don't know. Give you a quick teaser for the next upcoming. We've got Fusions, Synchros, and Links, I believe, is what we're going to tackle in the next video. And yeah, with Norden on the horizon for the first card we discussed. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.